Hey guys, welcome to Braun's Painting Network. If you stumbled on this video, I assume you must be doing research on your own interior painting project, and you landed in a good spot. Because with our Paint Trainer series, we do tutorials on all things related to residential interior painting. And we always put strong special emphasis on what I refer to as the task pillars, which is setup, job site protection, surface preparation and repair, paint application, and cleanup. In this video, we're going to take a deep dive into how you would go about properly preparing and repairing all surfaces in a room prior to paint application. Let's get at it. Okay, we're going to go through and do the surface preparation and repair in this bedroom. And the big rule of thumb with preparing surfaces for painting is you want them to be clean, dull, and in sound condition. So how I really like to start is to go through wall by wall and do what I refer to as a scan of the entire surface area. I carry my multi-tool or 5-in-1 tool with me and go through and inspect and scrape and hunt out not only the major repairs that are in the wall, but any of the minor surface anomalies or texture irregularities or any sort of defects that we want to take care of. And some of those decisions will need to be made by the individual, and what type of surface anomaly is not a problem on that particular project and what surface defects are a problem. There are certain things that absolutely need to be taken care of. If there are holes or cracks or puncture wounds, peeling, flaky paint, stains, those are things that you want to take care of so that you have a sound surface for the paint to adhere to for the long haul. There may be other irregularities that don't look nice, but they're technically not an unsound condition. So that's going to come down to your own individual desires for what type of finish quality you want and what is something that's going to bother you and what's not. So that's a part of setting expectations with a customer if you're a contractor, and it's a matter of your own individual taste if you're doing the project yourself. Once we go through and scan the surfaces, we're going to be able to solve problems throughout that process, and then we'll identify the major repairs that need to be dealt with and fixed from there. We will eventually scuff sand the entire surfaces that are going to be painted, but we will wait until we do some of the repairs that will also need to be sanded, and we'll do all of that at the same time before we apply the paint. As far as cleaning goes, if there was any major dust or cobwebs, or if there were major food stains on the wall, that's something that maybe can be addressed as a first step right away. As far as dusting and cleaning minor dust and that type of thing, I like to wait until after we do the repair work and we do the sanding work, because if we clean everything at the beginning, we're creating more dust and we're just going to have to clean again. So this scan process is a great way to start. Let's get right after it. Oh, and by the way, if you're watching this video, it's probably because you're researching the possibility of doing your own preparation and repair work prior to a painting job. And if that's the case, quick reminder, if you live in a home built prior to 1978, please consider the possibility of whether or not you may be disturbing old lead-based paint during the course of your activities. Essentially, if you are going to be creating dust plumes or paint chips or doing a lot of abrasive work like scraping or sanding that could create plumes of dust, you want to consider the possibility of potential for lead disruption. The older the home prior to 1978, the more likely that could be an issue for you, and you want to look into that before you handle your own project. So we're not going to get into all of those details and protocols on a video like this, but if you'd like to learn more, please go to the EPA.gov website. I will put it on the screen here, and make sure that you understand what you're getting yourself into if you are conducting your own preparation and repair work. When I talk about scanning a wall and hunting out surface defects, I don't want to just come in and look for the super obvious major holes in a wall and just go and repair those and say, okay, everything's great. I want myself as a professional painter, if I were what I recommend DIYers do, my team at Braun's Painting, I want them to go through and really scan a wall surface and make sure they are seeing every bit of it. Get high, bend these knees, get low. But as I do that, I am going through and I am looking to hunt out any sort of protruding surface anomalies that if we just simply scrape it off, here was an old paint run, if we just simply scrape that off, we're already making an impact on our finish. And if we were simply just scuff sanding it with either a disc or a sand pad, a lot of that won't come off. But if we're using this nice scraping tool, we're already making an impact on our final finish quality. So we go all the way through this walls with that process. Something like that, if you're coming across loose flaky paint, you sand off those edges, and that's kind of how we work through it. Let's get a closer look at this. All right, so I have this wall and I'm working on the top. I am hunting out imperfections, little irregularity like that. Watch, boom, scraped off. Look at these, we have an old heavy drip from prior applications. Let's scrape that off. Okay, we're making an impact here by getting that scraped off. And we maybe can even skim over that with some joint compound to make that look even better. You can see coming across some different things. Here, what we do when we have a small little nail hole, that's from anchoring art. What I like to do is scrape off the edge here. You can see we pulled some loose paint. I will take the butt of my 5-way tool and kind of push that in so it's more of a concave hole instead of protruding out. Now when we fill that, we're going to be able to fill the void, sand it smooth. We're going to have a nice foundation. We have a similar thing here. Kind of scrape off the outward protruding frayed sheetrock, and then we're going to use this butt edge and push it in. Now it's indented, and that's going to fill in a lot nicer. And then I would see if you scan the walls like this, you're going to see little anomalies like that. Here we have some peeling paint, probably from a piece of tape or poster that was here. So see how we're kind of scraping away that loose paint, and we're going to skim out that edge with joint compound on the next step. But this is, you know, kind of how we go through, and it's kind of like a typewriter. Boom, we do the top here. Now we're going to drop down to the next level on the wall. Super minor, but hey, a little dent. Let's push that in. We go through. You're going to make huge improvements. Something like that, we have pinholes. They're already in, so we'll hit that when we do the skim coats. This wall is a great example of trying to determine to what extent we want to take our preparation. We certainly want to take care of any very outwardly, very obvious surface irregularities, but as you can see with this wall, it has a lot of pre-existing surface texture. It appears that somewhere along the line with prior paint projects, the entire wall was brushed. You can see that there's a lot of brush marks and brush texture, and then it was subsequently rolled over, I'm sure, multiple times. In my opinion, if this was my own house or if we were setting expectations with a customer, we would recommend kind of accepting that. That's probably not something that's going to make a huge difference in somebody's perspective of the job being quality. The only way to realistically get rid of that, now we will scuff sand that, and we're going to use our Festool planer, and we'll be able to knock some of that down, but there's still going to be plenty of surface texture or application texture on this wall. The only way to eliminate that would be to completely skim coat the entire wall surface with joint compound and sand it smooth. Really probably not a practical use of a DIYer's time, especially if they're inexperienced, or it's probably not worth the amount of money it's going to cost you to have a contractor do that when they can focus on higher value things and get this room done more efficiently if we're not worrying about that level of texture. Have a little bit, sometimes you come across tape, very common when you had children's bedrooms where they're hanging posters, this can be tricky to get off, but you definitely want to scrape that tape off. You don't want to paint over clear Scotch tape like that. We want to get these anchors out of there. These are the types of things you'll come across as you're scanning the walls and scraping and coming across. You'll come across some major repairs like this. You can see the bubbling at this window trim intersection. And I got this stress crack through here. Then we got another crack that comes down here towards the heat register. So we want to channel this out of here. Anything, we want to break this loose. Hey, if you're new to this channel and this is your first time watching, or if you have been watching and you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell and help this channel grow. We almost got to see that tape, probably an old repair tape. Got to make it worse to make it better. We got to get rid of that unsound condition, and we'll come back to this and we'll repair this. But you kind of want to channel these out, open these wounds up a little bit so that when we set some new joint compound and tape, it's got more surface area to bind to. So kind of as we're scanning the walls, get some of that work done ahead of time. You can see here we have some rippling or bubbling tape. I could just take this and just kind of cut right into that. So we want to definitely get that instability out of here. You can see that we're really getting down into the paper. So we're going to have to scrape or cut out this whole area, and then we'll retape this corner and do some joint compound work. See that we pulled out all that looseness, that loose tape, and all that bubbling sheetrock paper in here. So we'll use the Trim Tex Fast Edge corner tape that's vinyl reinforced on a major repair area like that. Have a little bit of flexing here, so we'll put some more screws in here to anchor this down. So we had a hairline stress crack in the ceiling here. And there's a little bit of bounce, a little bit of flex in the sheetrock where I can see it move. So we're going to try to stabilize that, put our stud finder on here and locate the joist and put some screws in to try to take the bounce out of this. And then when we repair this, hopefully it'll have more stability and won't reoccur. All right, so we have a couple of stress cracks here around the window that we're going to take care of. We've already kind of scraped them and channeled these cracks out. Channeling these out so we got a little bit of a valley for some of this new joint compound to lay down into before we tape. Kind of have this crack coming through here. We've scraped away some looseness so you can see where there was an old repair and it did re-emerge. So we're going to go a little bit of the extra mile here, and we're going to try to anchor. There's not a lot of movement in here, but we're going to add some sheetrock screws. This is my stud finder. You can see right here, obviously, where the window is. You know, we're identifying the stud. So we're just around where this crack is. We're going to add a couple of screws in here just to make sure if there is any underlying looseness. We're centered on a stud through here. So we're going to do the same thing around here. And this will give us a little bit more stability. You can see right there was a little bit of flex in this. As I started to put it in, it pulled out a little bit. So that tells me it's just a little bit of movement in that sheetrock. See how this just pulled tight here with this? So now when we take this, a lot less chance or opportunity for this to move and flex with the temperature changes and humidity changes. It should hold up really well now. This had been repaired before. You can see the tape line right here. and it just reemerged and reoccurred. This channel here, you know, we hit stud in here. This is just went into empty drywall. There's no wood in here, so we're not going to do that here, but any areas where we could reinforce, we've gone ahead and done that. Now we're going to use Fibofuse tape, which is fiberglass reinforced tape, perfect for fixing cracks, and you are able to use the USG all-purpose ready mix joint compound. This is really good, heavy duty stuff. It has a lot of adhesive in it, and it's great for a foundation coat on significant repairs like that. So we've already got a ready mix solution. I don't have to worry about mixing anything up. And we're just gonna lay down, a bed joint compound, cover these screws, fill this channel that I created with joint compound, extend it a little bit beyond. Do the same thing down here. Load this up. Now we're gonna lay down. This Fibofuse tape is not self-adhesive like the mesh tape is, so it's very easy to tear. You could either, you know, what I recommend, I usually use my 5-way tool. We're gonna make it a little bit longer. So right about here, you can use your 5-way tool, and that's how easy it slides. You can always carry a utility knife, but this, you could actually tear this by hand. But we're just gonna kind of put it on here, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna recut it here, extend it a little bit, just take my 5-wheel tool, the crack's going this way. Now I'm gonna turn it at this angle, and we're gonna go ahead and reuse our knife now. Lay it in there. We're gonna go right over the top of this Fibofuse tape. What's nice about this Fibofuse tape versus the mesh is you can cover this usually with 2 skim coats. We're using the all adhesive now. We'll use the +3 when we do our final coat. I'll probably do a 3rd anyways, just to be safe. But that's about, we want to smooth it out enough so that we don't really have to sand between coats. We don't want to sand until we do the final coat. Kind of float out these edges, get those high spots out of there a little bit, and we're just going to let that ride and dry. Now with the all-purpose ready mix, it is not setting type compound that's quick set like the powdered mixes are. Those dry chemically and they dry quicker. This one, they want you to have an overnight dry, which when it's that substantial of repair, we always let it dry overnight before we move on with the repair. Down here, we're gonna do the same thing. This is a little bit of a jagged, cockeyed edge, so we're gonna do a couple of different strips here to just get this repair area covered up. I'm just gonna put a little bit more joint compound through this area. We're gonna kind of run this like this, that way. We're gonna run some tape this way. And it kind of follows the pattern of that crack. Got it laid down, and now we're gonna ride up over the top of it. A little bit this way, a little bit that way. And we'll kind of smooth out the edges. We want to make sure that we extend beyond the tape and the repair, a couple inches either direction. Work out these high spots and these ridges. Inexperienced people, do-it-yourselfers have a tendency to want to really overload and go real heavy on these repairs. You want it to be skin tight, and we're gonna go over it again. We'll come back to this repair tomorrow, and we'll do secondary skims. Don't wanna overwork it. We'll let that ride. We'll let this dry overnight, and we'll come back to that. We have the other corner here, have a pretty big crack that we channeled out pretty deep here. So we're gonna go through the same process. We're gonna plop a screw in here, right about in here, and then we're gonna load this up with joint compound, put some fiber fuse tape on it, and skim over it and let it dry overnight. It is fiberglass, so when you're working with it with your bare hands and your bare skin like what I'm doing now, you actually do get little pieces and little shards of fiberglass that can come off and irritate your skin. It's usually not too big of a problem for me because I'm used to it, but if I'm being honest with you, you probably should have on some type of gloves when you're interacting with a fiber fuse for the first time directly like that, especially if you have sensitive hands. That fiberglass directly to your hands is going to bother you. I've showed you a couple of different types of options of gloves that we have. I would probably recommend the heavier duty blue gloves that I showed. These things right here. They fit your hand really well, and you're able to really have good control of your fingers, and you can definitely work on and do repairs like this pretty easily wearing those gloves. So we're gonna kind of try to trowel that out like that, knock down that red. We'll let that dry and come back to it with another skim coat tomorrow. All right, so we're gonna practice what we preach. I got on these nice kind of butyl backed gloves, keep the fiberglass sheddings off of my skin and not irritating my skin. I'd recommend safety glasses with this too, so if you're ripping the paper, little shards, or if you're working overhead here, you do that. But this is an example. I mean, if you rip it with your hands, you have a tendency to rip it like that. So that's why I just like, when I'm cutting it, I'll hold it like that. My 5-way tool. Look at that nice clean cut. So we laid another piece up here on this corner. Followed the same process, put a couple screws in there, and now we're just gonna coat right over the top. And we've now had 3 of these 4 corners that had a pre-existing stress crack, which I believe all of them were corrected or repaired at one point. I feel really good about the repair we're gonna have here. Again, once these dry overnight, we'll be back to do some secondary skims. Now we're gonna attack this monster crack in the corner. All right, this is our corner where we had the rippling corner tape and some of the sheetrock paper was bubbling up. And you can see we have a pretty substantial gap here. So you can't use the fiber fuse, or you don't want to use mesh adhesive, self-adhesive tape in a corner like that. This would be traditional paper tape here, sheetrock finishing tape that is designed to fold in corners when you need to. You can see that it has in here the perforation and the fold so that you can fold it into the corner like so. And that's fine. This is thin tape. With a repair this substantial, it's had problems in the past. What I want to do is utilize this fast edge. It's 3 1/4 inch wide corner tape. It's flexible corner tape. It's from Trintex. It's really heavy duty stuff. It's got some vinyl. You can see it's got some vinyl backing. Look how nice and wide it is. And you can see that it's got the perforated edge so we can fit in the corners really, really nice. You can see the difference in the width here. So we're gonna go ahead, and this stuff can also be set with all-purpose joint compound. So we're gonna go ahead and get this put in place right now. All right, we're going to attack this major corner damage here. I'm just going to make sure that there's no residual debris in here. When you're creating that kind of dust, probably wouldn't be a bad idea to have an N95 mask on. I did most of the heavy lifting earlier, but even doing this, I'm kind of kicking up some dust. So I know I don't have my N95 on currently for the purposes of this video, so you can hear me talking. But you know, when you're doing these repairs, I'd recommend having your N95 on whenever you're kind of digging through. You get a little sheetrock dust kicking out. So we're going to use this Trimtex corner tape, 3 1/4 inches wide. We have to, it's not self-adhesive, again, like the mesh tape would be. So I'm just going to use my 3 and 4 inch knives, and I'm just going to load down and just put on a nice heavy bed of joint compound all the way through on both sides of the repair. Try to flood that channel. Load it up good here. Coming back to this repair, one thing that I wanted to do, I started to lay down a bed of joint compound, but I did forget there was just a little bit of flex in here. So I'm just going to pop a couple of screws in here. A little bit more stable up in the corner, and now we'll just go ahead and we'll reskim this before we lay down a bed. When you have ripped sheetrock paper like what we had here, you know, oftentimes it can cause the paper, the sheetrock paper, to bubble when you put waterborne products like joint compound or tape, or excuse me, joint compound or paint directly on it. But in this case, our entire surface area is going to be covered up with the Trimtex tape. So we should be good there and not have to worry about any bubbling tape. So what I like to do here with this Trimtex is let the roll drop. I want to kind of roughly measure. We want to be able to go all the way to the top, and I want to go a few inches beyond where the damage and repair area is. So I'll probably pull it down to about here. This is pretty heavy duty. You're definitely not going to rip this with your hands through the vinyl backing. So you can just use either a utility knife or a pair of scissors. Will work really well. Scissors are probably easier than a utility knife, but I had this in my back pocket. So we got about the right dimension here, the right length. We are going to get this kind of pre-fold it and get it ready to go into its area. We're just going to kind of lay this right down into this bed and just kind of set it with my hands here. Push the corner in. And what we wanted to do is actually go a little bit longer down here. So I'm just going to kind of pull this out. We wanted to go a little bit beyond that repair. We have a joint compound bed. It's a little bit longer. Here we go. And now I'm going to kind of push this in. Look how nice and wide and substantial this tape is versus traditional paper tape. Then we can just kind of smooth this edge down, and then we'll go over it with joint compound. Some nice runs of joint compound. I like to use 3-inch knife. Before I use a corner trowel, I like to just load it up with this 3-inch knife on either side. I'll get right down this side. And it's just going on really nice and clean and level. You might get a little bit of pockets on the sides of the Trimtex, But me putting on this top coat, it'll kind of fill any of those voids. And we're gonna have 2 more coats after this one. Just like the other repairs, we're gonna let this dry overnight with this ready mix all-purpose joint compound. Got a really nice bed there. A lot of times I won't even pull out corner trowel, but you know, there are corner trowels like this where if you really wanted to smooth that out, you could run this through down like that. You can see we got a nice initial repair that we will allow to dry overnight, and we'll come back on it and get another skim coat on it tomorrow. Okay, we have gone through and we have repaired some of the more substantial issues, some different stress cracks around the windows. There's a corner crack here. Turn the camera over here. We got a major ceiling crack. We got another wall to ceiling crack over there. Once we have the major repairs done and we start the dry time, then we'll kind of go through with I got my 3-inch knife and a 4-inch knife, and we'll start looking for the smaller repairs like little nail holes. Small imperfections like this, we don't need tape. We can just do little skims like that. If you recall, I went through and when we did our wall scan, scraped off some of these imperfections where we had some of those old paint runs. Even when you scrape them up, there can be some kind of protrusion. So a lot of times I'll just kind of skim over it like that, seal it off. This is where we had some flaking, peeling paint. We'll just kind of seal that off with a skim coat. Come here closer with the camera. In here we have this kind of weird, kind of old repair where there are hard edges. That's right at eye level and it's very visible. So what I'm gonna do, I'm not gonna cut that out. I'm not gonna retape it. We're gonna soften these edges just by kind of floating this joint compound out like that. Float it out a few inches to either side. We're gonna soften those edges. That'll get sanded smooth and that whole area will look a lot better. So you just kind of walk around the room like that, and as we're going, we can also make sure we didn't miss anything obvious when we did our scans. Here's some of the nail holes that we have, these chunks in the wall. And all of these repairs, these are small enough to where we really need 1 skim of joint compound, and then we'll sand them once they dry. We'll let them dry, and then we'll sand out the edges and buff them really smooth, spot time before we paint. Here's where we have some screw holes or nail holes. These are about as big, like these are screw holes, pretty big. You can fill it. What will happen is you might have to fill those a second time, because when their holes are that big, you don't have to tape it. But what will happen is this joint compound, once it dries, might bubble a little bit because there's pockets of air, or it might sink in a little bit and you'll get a little tiny hole in the middle. Then, so when you come back, once it dries, you just skim over it again and you'll have a nice repair. As you're going through, you're going to have these little decisions to make. So some of these things are obvious, like we have these chipped paint areas. We're going to skim those out. We have a lot of weird surface anomaly through here. So, hey, we're already got the joint compound out. Why not kind of skim this out like that? Fill in some of those voids and those imperfections. Let it dry. We can sand that whole area smooth. We got to do enough sanding work anyways. Why don't we just might as well add that to the mix and improve the quality of that wall section. We got a little bit of a dent or an impression right here. Tough to see, but we got another kind of hard edge surface anomaly. We'll kind of float that out. This is an example right here of a dent that we could fill. You fill the dent. So this is an area where you make your own judgment call, whether you're a contractor or you set expectations with your customer on what level of perfection they're looking for in the walls. Or if you're a homeowner, you can decide, hey, I want to fix all this stuff, or I'm not really going to get a lot of value. I just want the major holes and the cracks fixed. and I want to put a fresh coat of paint and get the color change. Some of these imperfections I'm covering up, you don't necessarily have to do, because it's not a matter of having a sound surface. As you can see, we got a lot of repairs on this wall. We've taken care of a lot of different small minor surface imperfections, nail holes, nail pops, screw holes, dents. We're going to go around to the rest of the walls in the room and apply joint compound wherever we can and wherever we think it'll make a difference on the project. Once we do that, then we're going to go through with our caulk work and we're going to fill gaps in the trim, and we have some stains that we got to block. So before we paint the doors and the trim here, we're going to go through and clean. You can see this would be an opportunity where you would want to wet wipe. Just got a damp rag, and we're going to go through on these doors and get them all wiped down, get all the surface dust off. Not only on the doors, but we'll go through on the casings and the baseboards and wipe off any surface dirt. Now that we got this trim wiped down, we just like to take a fine scuff pad like this, or a fine grit sand pad, or even a sanding block, and we're not looking to strip this down or pull a bunch of texture off of this, but we do just want to create a little bit of surface abrasion on here so that we're scarring it just a little bit, and this will help promote better adhesion when we put on the next paint. This is a semi-gloss paint that had been on here previously. So the glossier the existing paint, the more that you want to be sure that you do a little bit of scuff sanding, and it will allow for the bond on the next layer of paint to be a lot better. So we're going to go through and scuff sand all of this casing and baseboard right now. With the trim clean and scuff sanded, we want to go through and check for any caulk work. We want to fill that with caulk and finger tool it smooth so that we have nice clean edges with no gaps. We have some more gaps here, you can see. So we like to seal that tight. We'll go through even minor little cracks in the casing like that. We can fill that just to make it all a lot more tight and aesthetically pleasing. So whenever I caulk, I like to have a damp rag in my pocket so that I can easily keep my hands clean or wipe the surfaces as necessary. We got some very minor gaps on this edge. We're just going to tool just a little bit of caulk like that, very thin bead, and drag it down. And then I like to just take my finger and just tool it really tight like that. And then what you can use your rag here. We got a little bit of buildup in the corner. You just use your damp rag and pull that right through. Clean up any excess, and now the gap is filled and it's nice and clean. You don't want to just put on heavy blobs like that and walk away thinking you've done your job. If you put caulk in there, you can finger tool it, but then even then it might be tough to get it all off. So that's where the damp rag comes in. You can really pull it through. Let's take a look at this right here. This would be an example. So we got this tiny little gap here. If you just put a little bit of caulk in there, and then you can kind of take your finger through there, got a little bit of buildup, now you just go through with the rag and it's filled. Now when you paint that, it's going to look all super tight and nice. So same thing, just going to run this right down, come around the edge here and down through here, finger tool it like that. Once you get the hang of this, it moves pretty quick. Smeared a little bit on the wall, it's no problem. That's what the rag is for. Wipe it through. Pull it out like that, wipe that excess off the wall. We don't want to let that dry. One thing about caulk is it is not sandable. It's very flexible, very easy to manipulate while it's wet and when you have a damp cloth, but once it dries, now you can't sand it down. It will be how it is. You got to scrape it off if that was the case. So we go through all the trim. This is really just about what level of detail
in the aesthetics of the paint job do you want? So like, to me, that's an easy enough thing to just go like this, just so this trim looks brand new. See how it's difficult for me to get my finger in there? But what you do is you take this damp cloth and you can kind of ball it up and put it in that corner and kind of pull through. I mean, look how nice that looks. You got a weird gap up here. It's very minor, I know. You can skip it if you want, but we're just gonna do that, okay? All right, guys, we are back and we are going to continue these repairs that we did the tape on. We have the Trimtex corner tape here, and we have Fibofuse tape put on a stress cracks on different areas around this window. We have Trimtex around the other corner, Fibofuse on the ceilings. So we had set the tape with the all-purpose joint compound, which is heavier duty, a lot of adhesive, a little bit tougher to sand, but it's really good for laying tape and doing large initial repairs. Secondary skims, we're going to use what's called +3, the USG product, lighter weight, joint compound. It's great for small surface repairs, like some of these really small little repairs that we did that are only going to need one skim. It's great for that because it sands a lot easier, and it's also good for secondary skims over the top where we want to really level it out nice, and then any sanding that we have to do at the end, it's going to be a lot easier sanding with this product. So we have our repairs here where we had the stress cracks. We don't need to sand this before these secondary coats. If there's any heavy ridges, we might just knock some of that down. But you want to skim it tight enough where you don't have big heavy blobs. And now when we go back through, we can kind of skim over the top of it again and level and create an even more level surface. So any sanding that we have to do on these repairs is going to be a lot less. And again, this +3 product is very forgiving, much easier to sand, and works out really well. And with the Fibofuse tape, it also has an advantage over the fiberglass mesh tape in that it's much easier to cover it with 2 skim coats on a repair like this, to where you're not going to have the repair tape showing through. I'm going to really finish this strong here, really float it out nice and smooth so that we can minimize any sanding that we do and have a really nice smooth repair. Laying this out nice and smooth here. Sanding will be pretty minor that we have to do. This would be an instance where we got some heavier ridges in here. I might knock some of these ridges down just a little bit. See how nice we're covering this up now with the secondary coat, completely embedding that tape behind the joint compound. You want to extend beyond the repair, kind of float it out, as they say. We don't want to have abrupt stops where we really pile up the edges and be real heavy on the edges, because that's where you're going to end up getting what they refer to as hard edges in your repairs that are difficult to sand out. And there might be certain repairs that are flat out going to take three skims, and if that's the case, then you just need to take the time necessary to do that. We'll inspect each repair when we're done here and make a final decision on whether these are going to be enough or not. So with this corner repair, we're going to go back to using our 3-inch blade with our 4-inch blade to work this corner. Just going to knock down this ridge here a little bit. And we don't need to sand it, just knock that ridge down. Make sure we don't have anything too heavy, too high. Be a good idea to have your N95 on even at this stage. I'm leaving it off so I can talk clearly through the video. We're not creating a lot of dust, but a little bit in this scenario. So I'm just gonna ride over this tape again, walk this 3-inch blade right down A little bit of a stubborn little bump out here. I might just have to work through that, sand that out. That might be something that needs a little third, but a really nice kind of even drag through here. And then we can kind of finesse the end a little bit too. Which once you do that, you're gonna have a ridge in the middle. So that's where I would just walk it right back down again, like this. You don't want to overwork it. I have a little bit of a little bit of edges here. Then that's where the sanding will come into play once it dries. We'll sand that out nice and smooth. My joint compound heavy on this side when I'm putting it on, and then it's like it's all going on the edge. So I will almost kind of intentionally load it up on that side, and then when I'm dragging it through, it's a lot easier. Now there are corner trowels, which I laid on some of this, the all-purpose with the corner trowel, and we can use that, but for these types of corners where it's just a sole repair, we're not coming down on the wall, I really like just using these 3-inch knives to work it down versus the corner trowel, but that's a matter of personal preference. We're just pulling this 3-inch knife all the way through on this repair. We don't want to be too heavy on the perimeter. Drag this through. All right. I'll just walk this down very lightly. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on this. I just want to pull out any heavies through this actual corner. Make it easier on us when we have to sand. So we're in pretty good shape here. We're going to let that dry. Ceiling repair up here. This is nice and flat, so we're going to use our 4-inch blade and just take another pass through here. Definitely can be messy with joint compound falling. You want to make sure you're dressed properly and you have your floor protection down. Of course, once we finish this repair, we're going to have a smooth repair with around sand painted texture heavy ceiling, so we'll have to blend in the texture as well. All right, so we got our secondary skims on all these major repairs where we had to use repair tape. Now I just want to go through and inspect any of these minor little patches and things and dents that we filled. And usually a lot of times, most of them are probably fine with one skim. But this would be an example where we had bigger screw holes down here. Come on in closer. See how it kind of sunk in? This was a screw hole where he said, you could maybe use like some sort of repair tape on that. But really, we got it mostly filled. So that would be a situation. Some of it sank in. We're just going to skim over that one more time. Nice and tight. We do not want to be like this. That's an exaggeration. But unfortunately, you see a lot of that. Or more realistically, what would happen is somebody would be like that. Okay, and look how heavy that is. It's going to be very difficult to sand. Very rarely does a DIYer sand it well enough to where there's not super hard edges, and we've seen quite a bit of that here. So we're just, all you got to do, look how tight. We just work right through that, and it filled that hole. We might want to take a little pressure off there right in the center, but on these edges you want to be nice and tight. Here's another, you can see that we got a little bit of sinking there. So we're just going to go through and go right back over that. And now that's going to lay down, fill. And we're using the +3 on these small wall repairs, so it's going to be a lot easier to sand. Hey guys, we are going to go ahead with Colin here and start sanding these repairs on the wall. As a do-it-yourselfer, the most reasonable and practical way to do this is going to be with sanding sponges. We will also show you some of the power equipment that we have as painting contractors, but Colin is going to demonstrate some of this sanding. You can see right now he's all decked out. He has his parcel safety half mask respirator that is at least, is that P100? So P100, and Colin wears prescription glasses as well, so what's convenient for him is to have on goggles that encapsulate the glasses. It's not easy to wear regular safety glasses over prescription glasses. So he's decked out. He also has a if you're a DIYer, I wouldn't necessarily expect you to run out and buy a parcel safety mask like that. 3M makes some really nice half masks. This is just a typical N95 face respirator that also does really good job. That 95 just means 95% of particulates are blocked out with using this. And then these are a more, take that, Colin. These are a more typical pair of safety glasses. If you don't have prescription glasses, you can see where it wraps around to give you the peripheral protection on your eyes. So Colin has in his hand 2 sanding sponges. One has a beveled edge. These are both fine to medium grit sanding blocks. This has a beveled edge, which is perfect if you were to get it into corners, really allow you to work through that. And then he just has a block sponge as well. We have both of them, great for flat surfaces. So if you're a DIYer and you don't want to spend hundreds of dollars on power equipment, this is a very practical way. You're going to see how Colin's just going to go through. And you can see with these repairs, we didn't blob it on super heavy. We skimmed very tight. So now Colin's just going to gently pass around, putting extra care on the edges. And that's all it took. Now we used a +3 too, so it sands a little bit easier, but that's all it took. Now we got a nice level edge. Go ahead and hit that one, Colin. You can see how he's really working. He's not over sanding the center where the repair is. It can be easy for somebody to over sand and you almost take too much of it off, especially if there was a repair where there was tape. So you don't want to sand down and expose the old tape. And go through and sand this out. See how Colin's kind of working that through. You know, you do have repair tape through here, so again, you don't want to over sand, but Colin's just really nicely gliding through it, and he'll put a little extra attention on the outer edges. All right, guys, so we did some hand sanding with the sponges. Now, here's the fun stuff. When you're professionals, we have invested in this Festool HEPA vacuum called the Festool Clean Tech. And we are able to attach different types of sanders. We have the Festool Planex planer right here. And this, you can see, it has a big sanding disc head on it. And we can put different types and different grits of paper, very fine paper, all the way up to more coarse paper. And it has this vacuum hose attached to it that runs right into this HEPA vacuum. You can see our model is a CT36, and inside here you can put bags to collect the dust, and it's really an amazing machine. It allows you to sand major wall areas like this very easily and very quickly, and while you're doing it, it makes it not a 100% dustless experience, but pretty close. And you could argue that this machine, quite frankly, is probably overkill for something like this, but when you do what we do every day, it makes sense. This machine was really designed for sheetrock finishers as much as anything. When they have huge, large, open areas of freshly finished sheetrock and a lot of sanding, this machine's great for that. But, you know, now we don't do new sheetrock installation and finishing, but we do a lot of repair work. So this is incredible for that. We're going to have Colin fire this thing up, and you're going to watch how he buzzes through all these repairs with this machine. All right, look at that. Colin just knocked that wall out in not a lot of time. So if he were having to hand sand that, it would definitely move at a slower pace. Now again, as a DIYer, I wouldn't expect you to run out and pay what you need to pay for this Festool, but if you're a contractor, it is a must-have. Not only did we sand down the repairs, but look at all this beautiful abrasion. I'm telling you, this wall feels like glass right now. It felt like I was running it across sandpaper when we first walked into here. This is just an incredible result. We are number one applying, we're sanding the repairs. We have scuff sanded the entire wall surface to promote better adhesion of the paint, and we're gonna get way better aesthetic quality because we've knocked down some of the old application texture too. It's not all gone, but it's been significantly knocked back. So when we roll over this wall, we're going to have a lot more of that consistent roll stipple or rolling orange peel texture, and we'll have really good uniformity on this wall. The great thing too is, look, I don't see, where's the dust? The dust is in the vacuum. There is virtually no dust here. Now, if you look at where we've hand sanded repairs, we have clumps of dust, which this is okay. That's to be expected. This is the messes you're going to have when you have to hand sand repairs. You'll get some that clings to the wall like that, and we'll vacuum that up, obviously, but when you have this Festool Plane X, all that dust gets sucked into the vacuum. Here we did the hand sanding with this corner repair. This is what you can expect for dust. See how nice these repairs are looking once they're sanded smooth. You can see, this is what's so great about FiberFuse. You can see the impressions and the image of the FiberFuse tape, but it is very smooth. There is no ripped paper. Sometimes when you use the mesh tape, if you over sand, you fray the tape itself, but that tape is completely encapsulated, sealed off well. Look at those edges. We do not have hard edges in there. The repairs just look really nice. We're gonna start the cleanup process, and then we're gonna spot prime these repairs. Here's our Trimtex repair with that major corner damage. That has been sanded smooth. You can still see the image of the Trimtex behind here, but this is very smooth. There are no hard edges. This is like a really nice, crisp repair. We're gonna spot prime it and put some paint on here, and we'll see once that, if that illuminates any imperfections that aren't as visible right now, or if we have any pock marks. I wouldn't expect there to be a major issue, but like right here, see how when I really zoom in, we have some pock marks? So we're gonna let that ride. We're gonna put paint, we're gonna use the self-priming paint on this to spot prime it, and then we'll see what's left of that. And what we can do before we put on finish coats is just take a really tight skim coat and completely fill it in, and it will just become a perfect repair. Repairs are sanded smooth and ready for spot priming. One of the biggest challenges we will have on this job is, now that we got nice smooth repairs up here, we're trying to match as closely as possible the existing texture of the ceiling. And this home, you know, being the age of this home, it is a little bit more difficult because this ceiling has been painted in multiple times, and the original texture is very diluted out and drowned out, and it was probably sand painted at one point with a custom sand paint texture and then subsequently painted over numerous times. So we can't just take the factory mixed Texelite and think we can put that on this repair. It will be so gritty, it will really stand out and be way different than the rest of the ceiling. So even though it'll be uniform and it'll be repaired, it won't look as nice. So we try to put a little bit of extra effort into finding a mixture that will blend a little bit better. So I will take and mix a little bit of the +3 joint compound along with ceiling paint and a little bit of Texelite, intermix them, and we get kind of a solution that looks a little bit like this. It's you can still see there's a little bit of that gritty sand texture in there, but it's a little bit of a thicker formulation, and it's just a really nice combination. So now when we're trying to replicate this, get a close up on this, where you can see a little bit of that old sand texture in here, but it's very muted and dull. So then from there, we try to use a combination of things. I'll roll on some of this and you can see that it's going to be very stippled, much more stippled than what it is now, but at least we can get the product on there quickly, and we'll kind of float it out a little bit into the surrounding area. And then what we'll do, just to mute that down, but you can already see that it looks way better than if we just took Texelite and it was super gritty, heavy duty. I'll take a brush now and I'll just knock this down even a little bit more, try to replicate some of these brush marks a little bit, pull some of that grit through, pull it through like that, and now it's muted down. What we'll then do, once it dries, we'll take a sand block and knock down some of those really fine particulates, and then we're gonna paint over this a couple of times. We'll spot roll it with the sealing paint, and then we'll go back over the whole thing again one more time to kind of drown it out. We are back checking in on our ceiling repairs and the texture blend that I did. As you can see, I kind of created that Frankenstein texture mixture where we intermixed ceiling paint along with Texelite and some +3 joint compound. I feel like it's pretty good. We're a little gritty, a little heavy here, so what I'd like to do is go back and just knock some of that down with a sand pad, and it's see what it's doing there? It's now it's just almost like looks exactly the same. We still have to put some paint over this, so we're gonna flood this out. Honestly, this area here, I'm probably gonna hit it a couple of times. This is flat ceiling paint, so the rest of the ceiling is already painted, but when you got a flat paint, you're able to paint right in the middle of the ceiling, and once it dries, there will be no flashing or no lap marks because of the nature of flat paint. But I just like to go back through, knock this down with a sand block, take some of that edge, some of that grittiness off, flood it out with paint, and this is gonna blend in really, really well. You can also see even here, there is a older, very subtle, but there is a little bit of a water stain right here. Very common on the edge of a house where like gutters are and where the roof is coming down and dripping into the gutter. If there has been any sort of small minor leaks, you might get some sort of water stain. Usually it's more pronounced. This may have been painted over before, so it's very subtle, but there are special primers that we'll talk about that you will want to use to make sure that we are completely blocking that out. Over here we have some, what I call, or what is known as tannin bleeding. This is a mullion strip. There was, windows had been replaced at some point in this home, and somewhere along the line, this is called a window mullion strip. It's a piece of wood trim. It basically covers up the intersection of these windows here, and it may not have been primed prior to the paint being put on, so over time you're pulling the tannins out of the piece of wood in the grain, and it's coming to the surface and bleeding through paint. The good news is there are special primers, shellac-based or oil-borne primers that can be used before you put on paint to prevent that from bleeding through. If you just paint over it, it might look good for a little while, but it will definitely come back through. So something we definitely want to take care of. We are stirring up the all prime here. Colin's going to be applying this on the jamb. Highly recommend you wear gloves to protect this product from getting on your hands and on your skin. It is just difficult to clean up. Again, it doesn't clean up with soap and water, so you want to keep it off your skin. He's stirring it up really well here. You do get a lot of separation with these oil or shellac-based products, and stir it up really well before using it to make sure that you're getting all the ingredients throughout the entire container. All right, this wall is 100% prepped. We are on the verge of getting the first coat of paint on the entire wall. After we've scuff sanded everything, we went back through in a combination of dusting and vacuuming the walls. We pulled off any of our repair dust off the wall. If you do have any other stains on the wall, like food stains or cobwebs or anything like that, or some of the dust on the doors that we have, then that would be the perfect time to go through and get your final work site and all your substrates that have been prepped, cleaned up and dusted and ready to go. What we have done here is we have spot primed these major repair areas, and in this case we primed it with the paint. We're using a high quality self-priming interior paint to where we can just spot prime directly with that. You could also spot prime with any sort of waterborne primer like Zinsser 123 or All Prime, Smart Prime. You have Kills 3. There's sheetrock primers. There's a lot of great primers out there. And the real reason we're doing this is because we want to seal off the porosity of the repair that was fixed with joint compound is kind of soft and smooth. The surrounding wall areas are sealed off with a harder paint film. So if you were just going to paint over the repairs, and this is especially true if you're only putting on one coat of paint, you will see what is called flashing, because the paint is going to absorb more into the repair areas than it does the surrounded painted areas, and it will not look uniform, and you will see flashing, especially if you were looking down a wall on the long way and you have light crossing it. It will not look right. If you are going to do just one finish coat, spot priming the repairs like this before you paint the whole wall at one shot is very, very important. Now in this case, because we're double coating the whole wall anyways, we could have actually not done this spot priming like this and just flat out just put the first coat of paint is going to also prime off and seal off those repairs, especially if you're using a high quality paint. So when we put the second coat, we'll kind of level it and give it the uniformity. All right, so we got the first coat on these walls, and we're getting close to where we're going to put on the second and final coat on the walls. Couple of steps that we want to do before we do that. We are going to go through and very quickly and lightly scuff sand the walls. But before we do that, I like to do what I call secondary prep on the walls. We've done a great job preparing and repairing this room, but you always want us to give it one last time to go through and see if we miss any very minor details. Now that we got a coat of paint on there, it'll illuminate some things. So a real example will be, I have my +3 joint compound out, which is the very lightweight joint compound that's very easily sanded and very smooth, and it will allow us for any final little details to do that. So if we come in on, zoom in on this, just a little bit of a pinhole that got missed. Now we had a ton of repairs on this wall, so it won't be shocking to have a little bit of a pinhole. This is, I'm gonna go like that, use a little knife, skim that through. That is so tight and filled that void. That'll dry so quick, and that void was filled. When we scuff sand, we're gonna sand it right out, and the repair is gonna be perfect. I think we saw one other one here, but just like when you do your wall scan, you just wanna kind of scrutinize the wall. Here's a little one here. Boom. We don't even need to sand that, it's so tight. But you just wanna kind of go through, scrutinize your walls, get low, and overall we're really happy with how these walls turned out and how the repairs done. These major repairs we did on these intersections turned out really nice. One thing that we'll do to help illuminate this wall is we'll utilize the contractor light. See how that light will now illuminate a very little bit of a dent there. Now Colin, turn the light off. You can't see it, but turn it back on, Colin. There it is. If you want to really get the best possible result, using these small little contractor lights can be an effective way of getting that done. Now this was a real major repair we had over here. Very happy with how it turned out. We used the trim tex. We had all that bubbling paper and paper tape in this corner. No hard edges, sanded out well. It looks great. Now, if you want to go back with the light, and this is what I talked about earlier about little pock marks. Once you see right here, I don't know how well it's showing on camera, but there's some little minor pock marks in here. And these are the pock marks where it was filled up. Let me take that. There you go. There's a little bit of a weird impression there, and then a couple of minor pock marks. And we're just going to skim this out super tight. It's just going to fill those pock marks. We'll barely have to sand this. And now, next time when the paint goes over that, it's going to be a completely uniform, perfect finish. So the light is very helpful, but you also don't want to set unrealistic expectations on the finish quality of a wall. If you're a do-it-yourselfer or you're a contractor that is looking to bring the most value to your customer, and maybe you might consider this overly obsessing on minor defects, that's certainly a reasonable conversation. time is money. So whether you're a do-it-yourselfer or you're a customer hiring a contractor, you might not want to scrutinize tiny little defects to that extent, where the real value of the project is going to be, we had major cracks and holes that were filled, the room was cleaned up, and we have a nice, beautiful, fresh, multiple coats of paint. That's huge value for people. Sometimes filling a little tiny little dent or pothole isn't going to be value. So I don't want, while we're very detailed and we want to provide an incredible result, I don't want to give the impression that you should be sitting here scrutinizing every square inch of the wall with a flashlight and obsessing. Otherwise, you'll never get the job done. Or if you're a contractor, you're going to have to bill somebody $1 million to paint a bedroom. So there you have it, guys. I hope you found that helpful. Don't forget to stay connected, subscribe. Thanks, guys. Happy painting.